What's going on, everybody? Jolt here from TheTokenMinorities, and I am bringing you Week 6 of the NPL. This is the game of the week, and it is going to be a dandy, let me tell you. This week, we're going to have my team, which is currently ranked #1 in the entire league, with a 4-1 record and a +17 differential, against my friend Trev the King, or Trevenant Forest team, the Atlanta Braviaries, who are also 4-1 with a +16 differential, so he is no slouch. He's a very good battler, and I'm actually really excited for this matchup, as, in my opinion, this is going to be the most difficult opponent skill-wise that I'm going to be facing all season. So, with that in mind, definitely looking forward to this, and let's go ahead and jump into his team that I'll be having to prepare for this week. He has the Cresselia, Mega Charizard X, Machamp, Nidoking, Alomomola, Slurpuff, Registeel, Azelf, Umbreon, Aromatisse, and Magnezone. So, he has a very unique team. This is not really anything like any of the other teams that I prepared for over the past few weeks, as he has the potential for a very, very dangerous stall core with his Cresselia, Alomomola, Registeel, Umbreon, and Aromatisse. So, based on that alone, I have to be prepared for stall, but then he also has some very, very threatening offensive threats, namely Mega Charizard X, as if the Mega Charizard X is able to set up a Dragon Dance or two, it's going to be able to put in some extreme damage against my team, and that's really frightening considering how much my team relies on keeping a core intact in order to be successful in its matches. So Megazard X is a huge, huge threat in this game. Another notable threat in this game is the Nidoking, as I really only have one Mon outside of if I tailored Wobbuffet to countering it, that can counter this Nidoking, and that's my Mega Venusaur if I were to make it special defensive. So that's going to be necessary in this game, unfortunately, but I really don't like having to use Mega Venusaur as a counter to only one of his Mons, because that means I have to keep Mega Venusaur healthy, which means I can't use it as much, so it's going to be a tough situation for me to worry about. And then finally, the last Mon that I am worried about is the Azelf, as it is a very versatile Pokemon, and if you do recall, I did have Azelf in Week 1 on my team, and I traded it to Trev for his Tornadus Therian, so I'm still okay with that trade, but this week it is going to bite me in the butt, as my team is very, very weak to versatile psychic types. So that's something to keep in mind. And then just one last Mon that I do have to be thinking about is the Magnezone, as it is going to cause me to be more careful when I play with my Empoleon, as it can be trapped by the Magnet Pull. But let's go ahead and jump into the team building process. Okay, so knowing that Megazard X was going to be a huge threat to my team, the first thing I had to do was add Wobbuffet to the team, as it is the only thing that has even a chance of handling it, bar Focus Sash user, but I didn't really want to do that in this game. So I brought Wobbuffet with max HP, max defense, and then just the standard moveset with a Cut Step Berry, as I believe that if I play this correctly, I actually might be able to get 2 KOs with Wobbuffet, just considering the fact that he has a lot of bulky Mons, and then a lot of Mons that hit me hard without real setup. So the idea kind of is to beat Megazard X with Wobbuffet if possible, and then handle his other Mons either by means of Encore or by means of a Cut Step Destiny Bond later on in the game. So that's the idea there. And then from there, I basically just rebuilt the same team that I used against Togavor and the Portland Timbers in Week 3, as quite honestly, my triple sweeper core would put in an enormous amount of work against the Mons that he had, especially considering he does not have an unaware user, and my team is very successful as a squad of setup sweepers. So with that in mind, I do have Hawlucha with the standard Citrus Unburdened set with Drain Punch and Acrobatics, Drain Punch over High Jump Kick, simply because I am always worried about the potential for a random Protect user, as that would be a pretty easy strategy, I would say, to help one prepare for Hawlucha. So I'm trying to prevent that by using Drain Punch, and from there everything else is pretty standard. I'm using a Jolly Nature here just to ensure that I outspeed all of his threats. And yeah, I believe this is EV to outspeed and max speed Azelf. So that's the idea there. And then next up, Volcarona with Hidden Power Rock, Quiver Dance, Fire Blast, and Bug Buzz. So this is very standard, it's just a standard modest spread. However, I do have Hidden Power Rock here as a means of taking down the Charizard X, which actually is his only switch in to a +1 Volcarona. So that's definitely something I'm going to be playing close to my chest, and I'll make sure to use that in the game coming up to make sure the Volcarona plays a big role in hopefully giving me the win. Next up is the Subbatai Empoleon, no different than what I used in week 3, with the exception of the fact that I'm bringing Flash Cannon over Ice Beam, as Flash Cannon does hit his fairies for super effective damage, and yeah, so that's the idea there. And then we have a specially defensive Mega Venusaur and a physically defensive Gligar with Earthquake as the attacking move again for Charizard X, because I am so worried about that. So now let's jump into the battle. Alright, here we are with the game, and at Team Preview, I actually was a little bit worried, as he didn't bring his Registeel or his Umbreon, so Hawlucha really didn't have anything to set up on easily in this game. So the fact that I brought Hawlucha now is going to be a little bit of dead weight, although I still will have opportunities to set up later in the game. It just won't be as easy to get an early to create an early hole in his team via that setup. However, he basically brought the threats that I anticipated him bringing, such as the Megazord X, the Nidoking, and the Azelf. Those three were just guaranteed to show up in this game because they were such threats to my team. Then he brought the Cresselia, which he brings every week, so that was no surprise, the Alomomola, and then the Aromatisse. So it's going to be a difficult game for me to break through his team. It's going to be difficult for me to maintain the momentum that I want to maintain in this game. However, I do recognize that Volcarona is going to be great, just as I expected, and also Empoleon is going to be great because he didn't bring his two most likely special walls that would have been the Registeel and or the Umbreon. So Team Preview is interesting. I am anticipating him to either lead with Azelf or with Charizard, as those are the most probably the most beneficial leads on his end, and as a result I am going to lead with my Wobbuffet, as it can deal with either of them relatively well. So let's go ahead and jump in. He does lead off with his Charizard, and I lead with my Wobbuffet. Now, I am going to pause and take these turn by turn because it is a very difficult early stage of the game, as he has the option of either straight out Flare Blitzing me or Dragon Dancing right here, and because I did the calcs, I knew that Flare Blitz from an Adamant Max Attack Charizard was a 2-hit KO on this Wobbuffet, so I really couldn't do anything but counter on this first turn, as if he went for that Flare Blitz and I tried to go for an Encore, something was going to die, and I did not want that to happen. So I went for that counter, and he goes for Dragon Dance, which was the good play on his part, but luckily I do have a backup option and just going for Destiny Bond on this second turn, as I know that I can take a +1 Flare Blitz with relative ease, and the Destiny Bond will cause him to not attack me on the subsequent turn, and I can just Encore him into the Dragon Dance from there. So I make that play, and then following the Encore I go into my Volcarona, and here I make a bad mistake. I miscounted the Encore turns. I was under the impression that Encore lasted 4 turns as opposed to 3, and that is going to cost me here, as he is going to get up a Dragon Dance on the switch into Volcarona, and also on this first switch that I have Volcarona N on, and I'm just going to go for a Quiver Dance here because I thought I had 2 more turns of Encore, as I could have just gone for a Quiver Dance here, an HP Rock on the following turn, and then another HP Rock. However, that's not going to work out how I wanted it to, because the Encore is going to wear off right here, and I'm in huge trouble, as this is a +6 Charizard X staring me down, and I think I just got 6-0'd at this point. So I go into my Gligar, and basically I'm just anticipating a Flare Blitz or maybe a Fire Punch or something, but he ends up having Thunder Punch, which is kind of an interesting choice on his part, but I guess he was doing that such that he'd have a better option against Vaporeon, although I think Dragon Claw would have been a better choice, but that's just me. Anyway, I am just going to spam Earthquake here to prevent him from getting any health back, and he goes for the Flare Blitz and takes me out, and he lives at 1%, and that actually is 1 HP, so that was a very annoying circumstance to be in. So if I had taken out the Charizard right there, I would have been in a great position, because Gligar was not too important in this matchup. Charizard was very important in his matchup, and it just lives with a sliver of HP, so that's really rough for me. But I am forced now to go into my Venusaur, as it'll force him to use Flare Blitz as opposed to Thunder Punch, and he just goes for the Roost. I go for the Sludge Bomb, and I don't get the Poison, so that's another RNG that was not in my favor. However, he does realize that he is making a huge risk by spamming Roost as I spam Sludge Bomb, so he just goes for the Flare Blitz and takes out Venusaur. So now I'm in a rather tough situation, as I've lost Venusaur, which is my only counter to Nidoking. outside of Wobbuffet, and that's just going to make things really difficult. He goes into his Azelf here, which, due to an error in our previous game, I already knew 3 of the 4 moves that this Azelf has. I did not know an attacking move, but I know it is a dual screen Azelf with Stealth Rock. And I assumed that his final attack would be a psychic move such that he'd have a better option against Mega Venusaur. Just looking at his team, he really doesn't have many options against Mega Venusaur, so it makes sense to me that he'd have a psychic move on this. However, as you can see on this turn, he actually has Explosion, so I lose my Volcarona, which was my win condition in this game, and now I am in huge trouble as I only have Hawlucha, Wobbuffet, and Empoleon left, and he has 3 very thick Pokemon and Nidoking that I have to deal with. So let's go ahead and resume the game as he goes into his Alomomola and I go into my Wobbuffet. So here I know he's going to Toxic. It's his only play, and I'm just going to Encore him into that Toxic. Now, what I should have done at this point is that I should have stayed in and taken one more turn of toxic damage. Now I say this because if I were thinking ahead an adequate amount of turns, I would realize that eventually I was going to have to switch this Wobbuffet in and take a hit from Nidoking. And if I did the calc, which I did later in the game instead of at this point in the game, the Sludge Wave from this Nidoking would bring my Wobbuffet down to the point where after 2 turns of Toxic Poison, I would be in Custap range such that I could take out the Nidoking with the Destiny Bond. But I didn't think about that at this time, and I'm very mad at myself for not making that play. However, I'm just going to switch right out here after taking 1 turn of toxic damage and go into my Empoleon and just try to set up and try to go for game here. I'm going to need some luck, but unfortunately it's going to be very, very difficult to pull this off. I just go straight for the agility as it goes into his Aromatisse, which I'm assuming is going to be a specially defensive wall, but it turns out he just has Thunderbolt, which tells me that this might not be a specially defensive mon. I'm just going to go straight for the Flash Cannon, and it does a big chunk of damage, so this is definitely defensive, and unfortunately he gets a low roll with his Thunderbolt so that my Pataya Berry doesn't activate. So, oh my gosh, I know I'm playing badly in this game, I know it, but like these rolls are not in my favor whatsoever. Anyways, at this point I am just forced to go for the Flash Cannon, but the thing is, if he had gotten a higher roll with that Thunderbolt and my Empoleon was in Torrent range, and he goes into his Cresselia here, this Surf would have done an enormous amount of damage, like 70%, 75%, to the point where this Calm Mind would not save him from getting 2-hit KO'd. So as you can see, the Surf does 51% at neutral with this Cresselia, so definitely an easy 2-hit KO if I was in Torrent range beforehand. I am just going to go for the secondary Surf here, and he's just going to take me out with a Psychic, and unfortunately, because he has a modest max special attack Cresselia, he was able to break my substitute with a +1 Psychic. Otherwise, I would have been in a pretty good situation, but I am just going to go into my Hawlucha here and take out the Cresselia with an Acrobatics, and here he goes into his Nidoking, and here is where what I was saying earlier comes into play, as if I had let my Wobbuffet take one more turn of Toxic Poison, I could have brought it in and taken this Sludge Wave, which does 57.4%, taken another turn of poison damage on that switch, and I would at that point be below 25% to the point where my Custap Berry would activate, I could click Destiny Bond, and Nidoking would come down with me, and then it would be 1v1 Hawlucha versus Alomomola, and depending on his set, I actually could have won the game right there. He would have to be fully defensive Alomomola with maybe a Rocky Helmet to be able to take me out. I'm not really sure on that, but he would definitely have to be a defensive Alomomola, and unfortunately, because of misplays and because of poor rolls, I'm not going to be able to make that happen in this match. So this is going to be our second loss of the season, but it is to a very, very worthy opponent. He is going to be ranked #1 coming out of this week, and he deserves it. Very good team, very good battler, and I wish him the best of luck in his future matches. But as far as we are concerned, we are definitely looking to bounce back after this week, as it is our first loss that we've had in 5 weeks now, I think. So we're sitting at a 4-2 record, which is still very respectable. We still lead my division, although we probably will drop to roughly 3rd or 4th place in the league, but it's still early in the season. Not too concerned about that. My opponent next week is the Green Bay Palkias, who are a team that is struggling this season. So I think this is going to be a good week for us to bounce back and hopefully pull out a nice decisive win and maybe improve the differential a little bit further, because the standings for my conference after this week are going to be a little bit tighter. I don't know how Togevoir is doing. I don't know how Cheese Boy is doing. I don't know how Mew did this week, but if the records get closer, I'm definitely going to have a very high differential to make sure I win any tie breaks. So the plan is to win next week, and you can count on it happening. So I will see you next week. I hope you enjoyed. Have a good day.